Imagine that in these times, you can stay up to date regarding everything that's going on around you in your company. News, world news, helpful tips. You might get some FAQ, contacts to whom you can reach in case of emergency, and you can stay up to date no matter whether you are behind your desk or on the go. Imagine that in your daily work, you can always stay up to date about all your work, your projects, your files, meetings, people with whom you work. You can stay on top of all of that from a single place. You don't need to run, spread yourself thin between Outlook and SharePoint. You can get all of that from a single place where you already work. Now imagine that it's not that hard to find all these experts in your company, that you're not limited only to the few folks you know, but you can easily tap into all of the expertise and experience in your company, whether you know them personally already or not. Imagine that it's really easy in your company to tap into each other's experience and expertise, and you can share with each other's ideas, the things that you would like to work on or improve, the things that you see out there that might be the next big thing for you. And you can do this from a single place. You don't need to have separate system or papers, post-it notes on someone's desk. You can do it centrally, and you can collaborate together on these ideas, improve them, and actually bring them to fruition. Imagine that you could track progress of your work directly in the context of where that work takes place. You don't need to have to go to some other place, some other system, track it there, share charts and progress. No, you can bring it actually directly to the place where you already are, where you already spend your time anyway. And what's more, you can talk about it within the context of your work. Imagine that you can learn more about people around you, your business, and you can capture all of that directly where it happens, and you can bring it back to the place where you work. So you can talk together about the insights, the things you have learned, things you might improve, things you want to change. And you can do all of that from the same place where you already work, not from some other location. So these are all the different things that you could build on Microsoft 365. And with that, let's talk a little about that. What are the different options that you have, and why would you care? First things first, why would you even care about the Microsoft Cloud? So the Microsoft Cloud is a broad thing. It's, on one hand, it's a set of apps that you probably know already. You know, Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, but it's also more. It spans all the way down to infra on which you can operate your apps, and it extends through different building blocks for code, low code, no code apps. So it's all of that. And the Microsoft Cloud is a big thing. It's being used a lot. Like, as you can see on the screen, there's 1.2 billion users across work, life, edu. There are 500,000 companies on Teams. 150 million people work with Teams every day. And all these people store data into which your applications can tap. They can bring it in, given access, right? You can tap into all these insights. You can bring them into your apps. And with that, you can help people work more effectively and efficiently, right? So like, this is a huge market for you to tap into and build applications on for this big audience. So there are basically two types of apps that you can build. On one hand side, there are applications that you, let's say, fully own, whether it's a web app, native app, whether it's a bot, daemon, or like a workflow that runs that operates a process. In other words, application that you fully own and you own experience of that. On the other hand, there are applications that extend the UI of the Microsoft apps. So imagine that you have a part that surfaces as a part of a portal, or you have an app that a user might add in a way as they would do with a map into a document, or or a chart in PowerPoint, so they can embed your app into a document. You can have your app show up in discussion someone has, or you can have your app show up in a panel that is available to users when they work on documents to give them some additional abilities or insights. And you can also tap into other experiences like timeline in Windows or search. And there's also another idea of apps where you actually would bring these two experiences into one. So you will have your own application destination into which users can go, but they can also experience a piece of these apps into specific locations like chat or portals where it makes sense for their context of work. The interesting part is that the more you can integrate your app with processes of the company, the more it's going to be used, right? So if you can find this niche, if you can find this one thing into which you can integrate, which you can optimize and improve, there's this huge chance that your app will be used a lot, day in, day out, because it will be a part of people's work. It will be a part of the way they work and the way they interact with everything that they have around them. Like, no matter what type of app you build, at the end of the day, you will want to tap into these insights, the data that users have created in Microsoft 365. And the way you can do it is through the Microsoft Graph. The Microsoft Graph is a REST-based API that gives you access to all data that users create stored about them in Microsoft 365, whether it's their files, their chats, their email meetings, and whatnot. Right? So this is a central point that you can use to access all these insights. And if you know Office 365 or if you know I'm Excel 365 a little, you might know, right, that some of the data is coming from Outlook. Some is stored in Teams. Some other bits are stored in SharePoint, right? And all these products have been built in the past as separate things. But now we can build apps that combine all these assets into one set of data with which you interact. And we don't need to worry about how we match the user from one system in another. In other words, what you can do is you can, for example, start with appointment you have with somebody. From that person, you can get files that they share with everyone else on which they work. From there, you can get other folks who worked on that, and you can look up with where in your org they are. And so you can move from one entity to another without having to worry about access token, mapping IDs, and so forth and so on. Microsoft Graph gives you this unified access to all data stored in Microsoft 365. And the interesting thing is that Microsoft Graph has been evolving a lot. There are so many different types of data exposed through Graph that, like, this list doesn't even cover all of them, right? So you can already see that you have access to lists, to files, messages, email, chats, pages, and so forth and so on. And more of these is coming every week, right? So Graph is truly the one and only API for you to use to tap into all these insights. So imagine you have an app, you build an app. How would you bring that? How would you integrate that to Microsoft 365 to tap into that potential? I see in there 3 steps, right? So the first is allow users to sign in with their own account to your app. Why? Well, it offers you a number of benefits. Like, the first is you will no longer be in business of managing passwords, right? Because, like, every single time someone creates an account and loses password, like, you need to offer them ability to reset it in a safe way and so forth and so on. You are in business of building apps, solving problems the business have, not business of managing accounts, right? So with this option, by allowing users to use the account that they already have for their work, you simplify a lot of work for yourself. Well, the benefit you also get is that on Microsoft 365 accounts have already often enabled MFA, right? So people can use device and they already have to securely authenticate across any system that is tied into this account. And so can be your app. So you offer them this additional step benefit as security wise. And then there's a whole lot of other things tied to identity, which is like access policy, right? So for example, a company might allow to use of your app only if someone is on corporate network, corporate device, and so forth and so on. And by using identity that they already have, you get all of that for free, right? So it's just a small change, but offers you so much more with regarding to putting your app in context of somebody else's work. So that is the first step. Allow users to sign into your app with their work account. Step 2 is like once you have the user in your app, load data from Microsoft 365 and bring it to context of your app, right? So once you have the user, you can ask them to grant you access to info about other in their org or their files or their meetings or their emails, whatever makes sense in context of your app. Once you have that access, you can bring that in. You can bring all these insights in, and with that enrich your app, right? So imagine that you would build an app around cat drawings. So you can now bring not only, so you already have info about that, but what if you can also put that in context of, I don't know, upcoming appointments or the authors, or maybe you can show chat in context of that, right? So these are different things that you can tap into to improve, to add value to your app, to make it even more relevant to how people work, especially now. And the third step is that you can not only have your app being a separate place where people need to go. Like in the past, we worked a lot in offices and maybe people had your app open the whole day and they would only go off and on for a meeting elsewhere. Nowadays, that's not the case, right? Nowadays, many of us need to work at home. And with that, we change the way we collaborate. So with that, we spend a lot of time on Teams. So why not, for example, bring that app into Teams where people already are? Why force them to go to this another place, whether that's browser, client app? Why not bring pieces of this app into the context of their work, like build a bot or show a tab in Teams, right? So with that, you can increase the chance that people will work with your app, and you can make it easier for them to use it. Now, the cool thing is about the fact that if you want to build today on Microsoft 365, you can do it on any platform, any OS, with probably any programming language you want, right? Gone are the days where if you wanted to build things on Microsoft, well, you had to do Visual Studio, that was it. Today, that is no longer the case, right? We offer you SDKs for Android, iOS, Linux, Mac, Windows. We have SDKs for Python, for .NET, for Node, right? So no matter where you work, no matter on which OS you want to build, we have SDKs for you to build apps with Microsoft 365, right? And these apps can work as standalone apps, but you can also expose them in Teams, SharePoint, and Office. Well, the interesting thing also is that often when you bring these apps into the context of 365, you might want them to feel more as a part of 365. And for that, you can use Fluent UI, which gives you exactly the same design language as everything else in Office, right? The next step with that is, while Fluent UI only gives you the UI part, well, you still need data. You still want these elements to show something, right? And this is where Microsoft Graph Toolkit truly shines, because it not only gives you the UI, but it also brings the data in that it gets from Graph, like simplifying your work a lot, allowing you to focus truly on your app and not about plumbing, retrieving access token, handling exception, and whatnot. And then finally, when you think about other UIs like bots, Like in there, you might want to show structured data like orders, right? And instead of trying to think like, okay, so how do I display that, right? Because bot is only a chat. Well, it's not. Like there's this thing named adaptive cards that allows you to show structured data in meaningful way, and also in a way that always looks good across devices and channels. So an adaptive card will very much feel native, no matter whether it's shown in Outlook mobile, desktop, or in Teams chat, right? So you can use that and not trying to find your own way. Like, how do you make it in a way that it always makes sense and looks good? Now, as I said, all of that is underpinned by the Microsoft Graph. It's the API that you will need to tap into all insights and the data that is stored in 365, right? And there are SDKs available for all platforms that you might need. And at the end, like, you are not by yourself. There's community that builds additional tools, like specific scenarios that you might come across, and all of that towards the goal to make the life easier for you, allowing you to focus about building your app and not reinventing the wheel, thinking about plumbing. So with that, let's have a look at a sample app that's built and which allows you to get more or to stay up to date about everything that's going on around you. So here is the app, and this is an app built with React, Microsoft Graph Toolkit, SharePoint framework, and it's shown in Teams, right? So in here, you can see a number of upcoming meetings, tasks that I do not have apparently, so means I have some time off. And then there
lucky you.
It doesn't happen that often though, right? And also the files with which I worked recently. So let's have a look in the code, like how this app is built. The first thing is like agenda, right? So we want to show upcoming events. And the way it's done is that in my React app, I need to add this one line. This is a Microsoft Graph Toolkit component that show my upcoming events. Like, it's that simple. It's seriously just this, right? The next step is, well, I also want tasks. Well, then there's another component for tasks, and it's exactly just this single line. There is nothing more to it. Well, then there's also this another thing, files with which I recently worked. Well, in this case, it's a bit more complicated, where it's still a single line with a query that we issue saying we want to get from insights files that I used, right? And we want to show them as files. And in this case, files, like if you know React, it's nothing more than a function React component, right? It's seriously that. So in here we get the data, and in there we have access to all the things like URL of file, preview, view, image, and so forth and so on. So all of that is given to us. And you might wonder, hey, wait a minute. This is Graph, right? It's not anonymous. It's my data. It's not available to anybody. So where do you authenticate? How do you get access to this, right? And that is really cool. With Microsoft Graph Toolkit, all of this is this single line. This is auth. Like the thing you were always afraid of, like you would spend hours banging your head, like thinking about like all the flows, like which flow do I need? I need to go somewhere, create something. How do I obtain token? How do I ensure that it's valid and okay? The research, like, all of that is abstracted away here. Why? Because of the combo I mentioned. It's Microsoft Graph Toolkit, SharePoint framework, and Graph. Because of these four things, you get to work really so easily, right? And also think about it, like nowhere in this code, if you look at this part, right, in this one here, agenda, like nowhere in that we are issuing web requests, formatting requests, responses, headers, doing tokens. like all of that is abstracted away. As I said, allowing you to focus on building your app, adding value, and not building plumbing and managing tokens. That is beauty of that. Another thing that I already said is that when you build one key thing, you are not alone, right? Because it's a lot. Like when you want to build an app on 365, there's a lot because there is Teams, SharePoint, there is Graph, each have their own APIs, the way to do things. And you might feel overwhelmed at first that you might need to learn all of it. And it's partly true, but for a big part, there's this big community named Microsoft 365 Patterns and Practices, in short PNP, that's got your back. PNP is built around 3 pillars: learn, reuse, and share. So for learn, we have community calls, we have docs, we have guides, we have samples, we have tons of resources meant to help you learn, to help you benefit of the lessons that we have learned over time, you know, the quirks, the special things about edge cases that you might hit, right? So we have all of that in place so that whenever you want to do something, you can do it as effectively as you can. Then there's also the other aspect of reuse. Like over time, we built a number of tools. We have samples, controls that you can reuse as is, like turnkey things, basically, again, allowing you to work as effectively and efficiently as you can. Finally, we constantly share experience, the things that we have learned. Because one thing that is constant in our work is change. Things change all the time. And as we work, as we build new apps, we learn new things. And we share that with each other so that we can keep that momentum and work efficiently. And PNP, like over the years, evolved a lot, right? So what we have to offer you is over 600 tools across Teams, Graph, SharePoint, and whatnot, right? There's over almost 1,700 people willing to help you with anything you have, whether that's a question, whether it's a sample, whether it's a tool. Like these people are there for us, right? And everything that PNP does is being used a lot, like the controls that we build, right, are being used by 63,000 tenants, companies that use that in production, right? Over the past 2 weeks, over 73,000 people had a look at these assets, and they are there for you to benefit from. So let's have a quick look at what PNP has to offer for you. Right, you can go to aka.ms/m365pnp and you will arrive at this site. So in here, if you scroll down, we start with the regular community calls that we have around different topics like Teams, Graph, SharePoint, SPFX, identity, and whatnot. You can join any of them. You can, like, there is no need to register, sign up. You can just directly join them, and they are on teams, right? Then we have docs, the guidance, the docs that explain how things work, how they are meant to be used, and so forth and so on. And they span from SDKs to even things like how do you work with Git, right? Because nowadays everything is on GitHub. So how do you work with Git? What is a PR? How do you clone things? We explain all of that too. And on that, we also have videos, right, that explain things. Like, so if you are more inclined to watch as opposed to read, you can do that too. Then we have samples, and these span from things that are meant to inspire you, show you what can be done, to like sample apps that you might want to build, right? So like imagine you want to build an app that does something with a calendar in Graph. Well, you can do that. There is sample around that meant to help you start, as opposed to like start with an empty page and then what? Then we also have the SDKs, being tools that you can use to work more efficiently. I don't know if there's anybody on a call who loves Vim.
I do.
It's like the only time I would start, I didn't know how to quit it, so it's like no, sorry.
Escape : Q.
Yeah, it's colon WQ exclamation mark, right? Anyways, right. So if there's one thing you learned today on this call is to how to quit Vim. Remember that. But so we offer you tools so that you don't need to start from the blank. You don't need to copy paste past projects. You can work more effectively. And we have these SDKs. Some of them are built by Microsoft. Some other tools are open source, built and maintained by community, right? And they are all there for you to use for free, meant to help you work efficiently. Finally, we have some tools, right? So if you want to automate how things work, build scripts, deploy things, think DevOps, these are tools, whether you work in Shell, PowerShell, on Windows, Linux, Docker, you can use these tools to automate your work. I have finally here is overview of the folks behind these initiatives. But as I said, like there's almost 1,700 folks who help build these tools and assets. And then another thing I wanted to show you are the Microsoft app templates. The name is a kind of deceiving because they're not templates. In fact, they are so good that they are ready to use apps that you could directly use in production. But what's really cool is that they're called open source, but their source is on GitHub. So you can look into how these things have been built. If you have to build something that is similar, well, you have your 80% there, right? If you need to build something that is almost like that, you can see exactly how these things have been built. And the cool thing is that these things have been built by Microsoft. So you have this kind of opinionated way of how things are meant to be built, which is also a great way to learn. So with that, I've got for you a few next steps. If you want to know more about Teams, about Graph, about SharePoint, there are a few links to get you to give you more info about these technologies, right? I would also encourage you to take the learning path that we have at Microsoft, which is a more structured way for you to learn, right? If you like, there are folks who learn by watching videos or docs, but there are also folks who prefer more a structured approach. Like in the past, you would read a book. Nowadays, there's also a course being a learning path. So with that, there's one more last thing for me to ask you. What are you going to build today? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Waldek. Extremely inspiring. I just want to start building stuff today. Quite really excited about exactly. But that's the goal of the day. So that's quite. I'm quite happy that you went into some areas that we're actually going to cover throughout this day. So that's going to be quite interesting. Does anyone have any question for Waldek? Est-ce qu'il y a des gens qui ont des questions pour Waldek, pour Microsoft, pour mieux comprendre des trucs qu'ils ont essayé de faire, des questions que vous avez, des solutions que vous aimeriez déployer? It's good to feel free to unmute yourself and ask out to our Dutch guru right there, if we can make that happen. Dutch Polish guru. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions?
Three, two, one.
Yeah, if I can speak, sorry, I missed a part of the presentation for support plus at work, but we had a discussion 2 days ago with Nicolas Giorgio, and he was exposing to us that it wasn't possible to package Power Apps application, or Power Automates, and to deploy it automatically. So we have to recreate every Power Automate we do manually. Is this something on the path for Microsoft regarding this, or that we could use with PNP or other stuff for automate deployments regarding Power Automate?
So currently, the only thing that misses there is an API that would allow us to do it fully automatically, right? So we can already export Power Automate or a flow.
Yeah.
we can bring it to the point where it's something that we could even create on the fly. But the moment you import it, at that stage, we need to set up a connection. And that part, like, there is no way for us today to automate that. So today, there is none. It would be, I guess, it's an interesting question towards the Power Automate team, which is a different team outside of M365. But if I will find a person who knows more about it, I'm happy to relay it.
Okay, thanks for the feedback.
Yep.
That actually brings me a question that is kind of related, Waldek, to this. I can still put my non-Microsoft hat on for one day.
For like
one day. So I'm gonna use that question. I know you've it's not a curveball. It's more of a really nice pass on the tape for you. We've been using, when I was working at Valo, we were using some of the O365 or the M365 or the CLI for Microsoft 365. It changed name way too much in the last couple of months. I know. I'm getting used to it. What's that thing? What's that Microsoft CLI for Microsoft 365, and how it can? Because I know it can automate a lot of what Patrick just asked around. Can we export? Can we import flows? Can we do some of that? So, in maybe 2 or 3 minutes, what is the CLI for Microsoft 365? How it can help developers achieve more on any platform?
Sure. So the idea is to offer you have graph, like being the API against you, which you would build in your code, to offer you one command line tool across all workloads in 365. Whether that's SharePoint, OneDrive, To Do, and so forth and so on. So it's like the one thing that we see is that number of services in 365 evolves. Like there are new things being added every few months. And often what you see is that you need to have different PowerShell modules for them, or different tools, and it's hard to work with all of them because they're all of them authenticate separately. They work differently. One is CLI, the other is PowerShell module, right? So it's hard to combine them into a cohesive script, which is how we work. Like people in the field don't work along the lines of how Microsoft orgs are internally, right? Like you build M365 app that might touch To Do, SharePoint, Teams, and Outlook. And these are internally different teams that have their own tools, but on the outside, you want to build a single script. So that is our ambition with CLI for Microsoft 365, is to offer you a single tool that you can use to communicate and manage anything across 365 you need, right? And currently, we even include things like that officially aren't a part of 365, like Power Platform, because that is officially a thing of its own. We include that too. Why? Because we see exactly that in the field, people have that need to automate flows, the way you interact with them, report on them, right? So instead, asking you to have different tool, we want to bring that in, allowing you to use this one and the same tool, which you can use whether you are on Windows or Linux on a Mac, or whether you are in Bash or PowerShell. You can use one and the same tool to do your work.
All right. Je voudrais prendre 30 secondes.
Oui.
Merci, Waldek.
Oui.
Premièrement, moi, je dois quitter à 10 heures, fait que je veux juste passer 2 petits messages avant de quitter. Je vais revenir. Vraiment, un super gros merci à Waldek pour sa présentation. J'ai déjà essayé dans le futur avec le groupe d'usagers SharePoint Québec. As you remember, I invited you a few times to come to Montreal to come and speak.
I never did, and now I cannot.
But now, like, you proved to me and to us that there was a good reason that I wanted to ask you to come over and show. You're a great presenter. You did a great presentation, great session, very inspiring. Alors, merci beaucoup à Waldek. Aussi, je l'ai vu passer dans les discussions. Il y a eu une annonce qui a été faite cette semaine. Notre ami Sébastien va se joindre à l'équipe de graphes de Microsoft. Donc, c'est sa dernière journée en tant que non-employé Microsoft. L'équipe graphe de Microsoft, et il y en a une bonne partie à Montréal maintenant avec Daryl, avec Vincent, avec Sébastien. Fait que le French Connection de Montréal est en train de prendre le contrôle du graphe. Donc, si vous avez des questions, vous allez être super bien servi à Montréal, je l'espère. Sébastien, Vincent, ils ont toujours participé beaucoup avec la communauté et c'est cool de les avoir. Alors, une bonne main d'applaudissement à Sébastien et une félicitation à lui. Et un gros merci à Waldek. Je dois vous quitter, mais je reviens. Fait que après ma réunion, j'ai un meeting. Je dois travailler. Moi, j'ai une vraie vie. Je travaille. Fait que je ne peux pas faire comme vous autres puis être là tout le temps. Donc, je reviens vers 11h après ma réunion. Alors, bonne continuité.
Merci, Serge.
Ouais, merci, Serge.
Cool. So, just for you, Waldek, Serge was saying how bad you were and everything. So
I know. It's like, no, thank you, but thanks, but yeah, we were not getting that guy again, right?
Oh, no, if we could have you 1 or 2 times a year, we would do it. Let's talk about it when I'm going on the other side. So we still have approximately 10 minutes before our official break. Anyone else has something to say? Does Vincent has a tricky question for Waldek?
Curveballs, I accept anything. Keep them coming.
There you go. Awesome, well, guys.
I don't have any tricky question yet, but oh yeah, how do you manage emails, Waldek?
Very good. Actually, to be honest, it's not that bad yet. Fingers crossed. Still, I think like over so I've been now with Microsoft since October 1, so that is roughly 45 days. I think I received more emails than in the past 4 years or so, all together. So
yeah,
it is a difference, but it's not as bad as yours.
It's up now. Now that I'm a developer, I don't have any emails anymore. Nobody wants to talk to me anymore. We just say code, write the code. That's it.
Yeah. Is it done yet?
Is it done yet? Is it done yet? Is it done yet? But yeah, it's better.
I guess my inbox is already full.
CSM, bicep, CSM, bicep. Yeah, so we have these 20 million assignments for you to complete in week 1.
It looks like it's gonna be like that. It's interesting.
Fun. It's fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna love it. Before we let Waldek go, anyone wants to ask a last-minute question? SharePoint framework, community,
Teams, PNP, Microsoft Graph. I mean, no, there are folks from Graph, so it's like I don't need to know anything about Graph today, right?
It depends. And if you guys don't have a question right now, please feel free to put that in the chat, and we'll make sure that Waldek gets the question later on. Waldek, thank you so much for your time. Really, really happy you could make the time for us. I think the community will definitely enjoy. As enjoyed your time, and thanks for being here. It was always awesome to chat with you. Always great to have these small discussions across the pond. I like to call them. Thank you so much. We're going to let you go to the family now. I know it's probably late.
I'm still at work. No. So I'm still I still have a little bit to work. But I really enjoyed the chance to talk to you guys. To tell you more about 365. Thanks again for having me, and have a really great bootcamp. And I'd love to hear more about what you've built.
Cool. Thanks, Waldek.
Thank you, guys. Bye bye. Have a good one.
Thank you.